All right, so imagine, you're back in school, cracking open that history textbook, right? But this time, instead of the story starting in 7076, it begins in 1619.
Interesting.
That's the whole idea behind the 1619 project, which was created by Nicole Hannah-Jones, and we actually found out about it from a really interesting episode of NPR's Throughline podcast.
Okay.
And we're going to kind of dive deep into it today, look at what it's saying, all the controversy it caused, and really what it says about how we view American history.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it's pretty thought-provoking stuff. So, the 1619 Project, it doesn't just, add a little footnote to American history. It really tries to, totally change the story we tell. It basically says that to understand America, you absolutely have to understand the Black experience, especially the legacy of slavery.
Yeah. The 1619 Project zeroes in on that year because that's when the first enslaved Africans were brought to the English colonies. It's a turning point, really.
Exactly. And Hannah-Jones argues that this is a much more accurate place to start if we want to understand how America became what it is.
It definitely challenges that whole idea of American exceptionalism, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting because, Hannah-Jones, her own experience in school is actually what led her to this whole idea.
Oh, how so?
Well, growing up, the history she learned was really, kind of a whitewashed version.
Yeah, I can see that.
Almost no mention of the Black American experience at all.
It wasn't until she took this high school elective, a Black Studies class, that she really started to see things differently. It, opened up a whole new world for her.
Yeah, she tells this really powerful story, about when she was a kid and realized that Egypt was in Africa. She was totally shocked because everything she'd learned had always separated the two. And, it just goes to show how the stories we're told, even as kids, they have this huge impact on how we see the world.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what the 1619 Project tries to do, right? To shake things up, to make us rethink how we see America's past and even its present.
You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
And one of the ways they do that is through language, like how they use words.
Yeah, they're very deliberate about that.
Yeah, for instance, when they talk about slavery, they use the term labor camp instead of plantation.
Interesting.
It may seem subtle, but it actually makes a huge difference.
Well, Hannah-Jones says that using labor camp, it doesn't sugarcoat anything. It forces you to see these places for what they really were. Places of forced labor, exploitation, and just terrible suffering.
Yeah, definitely creates a much harsher and probably more accurate image. But, changing the narrative like this, it didn't exactly come without pushback.
Oh, no, not at all. The 1619 Project, it ignited a firestorm of controversy, especially from conservatives.
Huge backlash.
Yeah, and part of that, I think, has to do with the timing. When it came out, there was this rise of what some call white grievance politics, and we were still dealing with the feel-out from the 2020 racial justice protests.
Right. It was a very tense time. So it was almost like just bringing these hidden narratives to light was seen as a threat by some. But, Hannah-Jones has this interesting take on it. She says the backlash actually proves that the project is working.
In a way, yeah, because it means it's disrupting that established narrative, forcing people to have these tough conversations, even if they're uncomfortable.
Exactly. And, it's really fascinating how looking back at history can trigger such strong emotions.
Yeah.
It says a lot about the power of those stories we tell ourselves and how they shape our whole sense of who we are as a country. But the criticism didn't just come from the right.
That's right.
There were also people on the left who were worried that the 1619 Project was focusing too much on race and not enough on the role of class in American history.
Right. That was a common critique.
Yeah, but Hannah-Jones, she actually addressed that head on. She explains that because the project is specifically looking at the legacy of slavery, it has to use a racial lens. She also points out that throughout history, racial divisions have often prevented working-class people from coming together to fight for their rights.
It's true. Those divisions have been a major obstacle to solidarity movements.
Yeah. Now, one of the most controversial parts of the 1619 Project was its claim that for some colonists, protecting slavery was actually a big motivator during the American Revolution.
Ah, yes, that was a very hot topic.
It definitely caused a lot of debate, both among historians and just regular folks. But you know what, Hannah-Jones? She stands by that argument.
She does.
Yeah, and she points to new historical research that backs up her view. She reminds us that our understanding of history is always changing, that new discoveries can challenge old ideas.
That's an important point. History isn't static. It's a constant process of reinterpretation. Who's telling the story, whose voices get amplified. It all has a huge impact on the narrative we inherit.
That's a really good point. And this leads us to another interesting aspect of the 1619 Project.
One thing the 1619 Project really stresses is that throughout American history, the main stories we hear, they've mostly come from those in power.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
that means the perspectives of the people who were oppressed, they get pushed aside or silenced completely.
And Hannah Jones, she's pretty clear that those missing voices, those untold stories, they have real consequences.
Oh, absolutely.
She says if we learn a distorted version of history, it's harder to understand what's happening right now and to fix the problems that are rooted in that history.
Makes you think, doesn't it? Like, how can we address the root causes of inequality if we don't even acknowledge where they came from?
Right, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone.
Yeah.
And that's actually where the book version of the 1619 Project becomes really important.
Your book.
Yeah, it goes way deeper than the original magazine articles could. There's more space to really explore these complex issues and get a fuller picture of the events and their impact.
That makes sense. I mean, a book provides a lot more room for nuance and detail.
Exactly. And what's cool is that they even included updates and revisions based on feedback they got and new research that came out. It shows they're really committed to getting the story right.
Definitely. It highlights that history is a process, right? We're always learning, always reevaluating.
Exactly. And the 1619 Project, it really brings up this whole question of historical revisionism. Like whose stories get told, whose voices are heard, and how does that shape how we see the world?
Big questions.
It's a huge deal. And Hannah Jones, she argues that if we're learning a false or incomplete history, it holds us back. We can't really deal with the problems of today if we don't understand where they came from.
It's like trying to navigate without a map. You're bound to get lost.
Exactly. And, she even suggests that America's real exceptionalism, if there is such a thing, doesn't lie in, all the high-minded ideals,
Yeah.
but in its persistent social and economic inequalities.
Interesting take.
It's like she's saying that the legacy of slavery and colonialism, it's still shaping the nation today. And makes you wonder, can a nation truly move forward without everyone understanding its past, even the hard parts?
That's the challenge, isn't it? To grapple with the complexities, the good and the bad, and still find a way to move forward together.
Yeah. And the 1619 Project, it definitely doesn't shy away from those uncomfortable truths. It really digs into those overlooked parts of American history, saying we need that full picture to create a better future.
It's not about erasing the existing narratives, but about adding to them, enriching them, including the voices that have been left out.
Right, it's like expanding the frame, showing the full picture.
Exactly. And when we do that, we can see the present in a whole new light. We can start connecting the dots between the injustices of the past and the problems we face today.
One of the most powerful arguments they make is that the legacy of slavery is built into our institutions.
It's not just about individual acts of racism, but about systems that are designed to perpetuate inequality.
And that makes you think about our founding ideals, freedom and equality.
Right. The 1619 Project points out this hypocrisy that those ideals only applied to some people while others were enslaved.
And that shadow, it's still with us today.
It forces us to ask them hard questions about what it really means to live up to those ideals, to actually make them a reality for everyone.
To close the gap between what we say and what we do.
Exactly. The 1619 Project isn't just about telling historical facts. It's about changing how we understand the American story.
It's about shifting our perspective.
It's about centering the experiences of those who have been pushed to the margins. And in doing so, it challenges us to rethink what it even means to be American.
Who gets to be part of that story, and what stories do we choose to tell ourselves about who we are?
It really makes you think about, what it means to be American and what kind of future we want to build. It's a powerful message for sure, and it feels really relevant right now.
Yeah, it definitely struck a chord with a lot of people. One thing that really got me thinking was Hannah Jones's point about how, holding on to a false history, it actually stops us from dealing with inequality today.
That's so true.
If we ignore the real roots of these issues, we're just treating the symptoms, not the actual disease.
Exactly. If we cling to this, sanitized version of the past, we're never going to see the real picture of the present. And we'll miss those chances to dismantle those systems that keep causing injustice. The 1619 Project, it gives us a way to understand those roots, those historical injustices that are still affecting us today.
It's like a wake-up call. History isn't just something we read about in the book, it's something we're still shaping.
We're part of it.
Yeah, and that's a big responsibility, but it's also kind of empowering. It means we can actually do something about it. So I guess the big question is, how does this project change the way you see American history? Did it make you question the things you were taught?
I think it makes all of us question, those stories we tell ourselves about who we are as a nation. And that's a good thing.
It is. It forces us to get real about our past,
Yeah.
even the messy parts. But it's not about dwelling on the negative. It's about understanding where we came from so we can build a better future.
It's about healing those wounds.
The 1619 Project, even though it talks about struggle, it also has this message of hope. It's not just pointing fingers, it's showing us a path forward.
A path where everyone's included.
Exactly. A future that acknowledges everyone's contributions, and where we're really working towards justice and equality for all.
A future where we all benefit.
It's inspiring to see how many people are having this conversation now, thanks to the 1619 Project. It's clear that people are hungry for a more honest and, well, a more inclusive way of looking at our history.
It's really amazing.
It just shows the power of storytelling and how important it is to let those marginalized voices be heard. And it proves that these conversations, they can actually lead to real change.
Well, as we wrap up our deep dive into the 1619 Project, I hope you're walking away with, a sense of the challenges ahead, but also all the possibilities. It's a complicated topic, for sure.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
But it's so important to engage with it if we're serious about creating a more just and equitable future.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Mm.
Thanks for joining us on this journey, everyone. We hope you keep thinking about these ideas, talking about them and seeking out different perspectives on this really crucial part of our history. And if you enjoyed this deep dive and you're ready for more thought-provoking conversations, make sure you subscribe to our podcast. We'll be back with more explorations, uncovering connections, and shedding light on the complexities of the world around us. So, until next time, keep those questions coming, keep learning, and keep pushing for a better world.